Lawyers have read it. What are the craziest, yet legal, last will and testament stories you had to deal with? I worked at an attorney office, and little older lady gave her house and her belongings to a bus driver. The bus driver was nice to her and would help her. We were all waiting for hell to break loose when her family found out. What happens in that case? They can contest it. I was a witness to the signing. She seemed fine, knew the answers to the questions, so she wasn't having mental problems as far as we could tell. Military lawyer here. Had a young client come in for a will before deployment. He put a request to be buried in blue jeans, a Chris Jericho t-shirt, and his replica WWE Championship belt. Happily, this airman didn't meet any misfortune on his deployment. Not a lawyer, but paralegal. We had a dying client in hospital change her will by recording it on a smartphone. It set a precedent and made the local paper. The lawyer in question has the page from the newspaper framed in his office. What was the precedent that got set? Was the recording a viable legal document of sorts, or was it not usable? Not OP. I'm gonna do a search and find it. But when I was doing my upper year contracts course in uni, we covered a case where a farmer had gotten stuck under his tractor. He thought no one would find him in time, so he carved, "I leave it all to my wife," and it was deemed a legal last will and testament by the courts. I would imagine the tape recording would be the same. The Great Stort Derby was when a wealthy Canadian left a substantial amount of money to whichever woman had the most children in the 10 years following his death. It was upheld through numerous court battles, and 4 women tied with 9 children each. 2 women were also given smaller payouts. One had 10 children, 2 were stillborn, and another had more than 9 kids, but a few were illegitimate. The guy also had some other interesting things in his will and was a known practical joker. Where I went to college, there's an oak tree that was deeded to itself in the man's will. Now called the tree that owns itself. It sits in the middle of a road and you have to go to one lane to drive around it. Story is that a man loved the tree so much as a kid that around the time he died in the 1830s, he gave the tree possession of itself. This technically wouldn't stand up in a court of law, but the county and local populace has accepted it and takes care of it. The original tree actually died, and the current one is a product of one of the acorns of the original. I work for a lawyer who does wills. We've had a lady put in her will that one of her adult sons was not to receive his share until he visited a dentist, and the other son lost 70 pounds. Another lady put in her will that she wanted her cats cremated with her when she died. Told her that's not going to happen. Human remains and animal remains do not get cremated at once. So she settled on cremated separately and joined together, then buried together. Typically wills are about 10 pages for the average person. We had a lady who had a 56-page will. She detailed everything from her house to people for every single item in this lady's house. We had a man put in his will that his family was to go to the zoo immediately after his burial that day. We thought that was more heartwarming. We work with many people from a certain religion. A lot of people we do wills for leave at least 90% of their estates to the church instead of their families. Wait. Were her cats dead beforehand, or did this will require the cats to be killed so they could be buried with her? Euthanized to be buried with her. I was so pissed off. I told the lawyer that's absolute bullshit. And though she agreed, she had to put in as instructed and hoped that living family members at the time of her death wouldn't uphold that part. 2 sons of really wealthy couple go to the family lawyer to have the will read. Lawyer is super nervous. He has known them both since they were kids. One son gets the entire inheritance, and the other gets nothing. The explanation was that it should be passed through to blood relatives only. So that was the day he found out he was adopted. Why even adopt a kid if they don't mean to treat them as their own in the end? I don't understand some people. My dad is a lawyer, and a friend of my grandpa, who was in his 80s and had end-stage cancer, made his will. He was a big fan of weapons and wanted to give them to my dad. He's a fan too. He left him 2 shotguns, a Glock and a revolver. My dad told him it would be better to write it in the will because my country's law says you can only own 5 weapons at a time. My dad had already 4 at the time, so he would have to give some up. But if you inherit them, it doesn't add to the limit. So they made a testament, and he gave him the weapons except for the revolver. Because it was his favorite, and didn't want to give it away yet. My dad instantly knew why but didn't say anything. 2 weeks later the guy shot himself with the revolver. He still hasn't got the revolver because police still has it. He never told my grandpa that he knew, but he didn't want to take this guy's chance of ending his life on his own terms instead of waiting for the cancer to win. Not a lawyer, but I had an experience with this years ago. Rich uncle of mine, real crazy. Not in the good way. He would come to visit us when we were kids maybe once every 10 years. Last time he did, he brought us to a Denny's. He met my brother in an airport, was there for an hour before he got on another plane and went home. When he died, he had no friends. He had driven his wife to basically drink herself to death a few years prior. He left his entire estate to an Elvis impersonator. Everything. I was a witness to one where the lady wanted to make sure her daughter divorced her husband, when she had no intentions of doing so, if she wanted her part of the estate. Thankfully, that is not legally enforceable, so nothing came from it. This large French farmer's family had been fighting each other for 15 years over their parents' estate. Everything and anything had been a weapon in this all-out war: debts, spoils, barns, plots, cows, wills, and whatever. Defeats followed victories, failures followed compromises, but progress was being made, and at some point the killing zone turned to a standstill. Everything was agreed as long as no one talked antics, jewelry, furnitures, kitchenware, photographs, laundry, or tools. A long protracted period ensued, any goodwill tentative harshly discouraged before even being aired. Time went on with no issue in sight. Then someone suggested they just drag all the stuff into the farm's courtyard, pour petrol on it, and set it all afire. Everyone agreed. I mean, it's not that crazy. It's depressingly predictable. Rich old aunt, the only one in her huge family with any money, having been a doctor on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. She set up a living trust to take care of her poor relations in the Philippines, to continue as a death trust whenever she died. Her favorite niece was in control of the trust, and of course the niece was responsible and even-handed and never ever embezzled any of the money to set herself up as a newspaper publisher and concert producer and media mogul with new expensive cars and lots of first-class Pan-Pacific travel. Nope, not her. Ha ha ha, of course the trustee did all that. Hundreds of thousands of dollars missing, and an unholy mess of sifting through money transfers and property purchases in 3 countries. The niece also had a bigamous marriage to some loser in the Philippines. Her legal husband in North America was bedridden and dying slowly, to whom she sent buckets of her aunt's money to build a luxury villa. She vehemently denied such a relationship existed. She also had photos of the wedding on her Facebook page. Not the smartest embezzler out there. From where I sat, in the attorney's office representing the poor relations trying to stop the trustee's embezzlement, the craziest part of it all was that after years of fighting, we finally got complete financial disclosure for the trust on like December 22nd, and it was such a Christmas miracle that I almost put off my Christmas trip to NYC to gleefully pore through every poorly redacted line of it. Also, we had the rich old aunt's ashes sitting on our bookshelf for years, since the dispute about what to do with her remains was part of it all. Not a lawyer, but I have a crazy story. My grandma's sister was a narcissist and extremely vindictive. She and her husband gained a significant number of assets over the years, including a somewhat profitable farm with over 100 acres of fields. They had a few children, all boys, and they all had wives and children of their own. Her husband died about 6 years before she did. Somehow, in their 50-plus years of marriage and living on said farm, had they never bothered to go to a lawyer and write a will. Instead, she wrote a note and left it in their safe of legal documents saying that nothing was to go to wife of son who died almost 20 years ago, or her children, and said aunt's grandchildren. This, because the son's wife was more outspoken and wouldn't be controlled by her. Aunt absolutely despised her, and my entire family too. So everything went into probate, and the kids are still trying to get everything squared away a year later. But the people she wanted excluded should be getting something out of it too. The local newspaper ran a story with pictures of a house that was left to a cat when the owner died. The cat was the only occupant. The woman's lawyer maintained the house for the cat from the deceased owner's trust fund. I always wondered if there might have been a little motivation to hasten Kitty's demise. Probably not if you get charged billable hours to go feed a cat. That's a sweet gig and probably a nice break from office work. Not a lawyer, but when my dad was growing up there was this little old lady across the street without any family. She was from Finland and her husband died during WW II. She immigrated to the States and had no one. So my grandparents would knock on her door to chat, take her grocery shopping, etc. They made my dad and brother help out around her house yard, etc. She loved my dad and uncle, treated them like her own kids, cookies and treats and presents. When Dad was in Vietnam, she would record him voice messages on tapes and send them to him with letters telling him what life was like in the neighborhood and how she hoped he'd be home safe soon, that she prayed for him, etc. When he came home, he'd stop by to chat and help out around the house, bring her macaroons and just sit and talk for a while. One day Ms. Lingard died and a lawyer called my grandparents. She had left them a sizable amount of cash and stock, and her paid-off house to my dad and his brother. My family had thought she was penniless. Never underestimate how much little, simple things can mean to people. You just might be one of the best things in their life. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.